What's up, everybody? We are live. I think we're good to go now. Sorry about that, guys. But thank you, everybody, for joining us. For people who are new to the show, this is the Union of the Unwanted. It's when we just bring a lot of interesting people together to spark some interesting conversations, and that's what we're doing today. Today we have a great mixture of people, different backgrounds, different researchers, and I think it's going to be
sexuality.
Also sexuality, and so I think it's going to be a fun conversation. So people who let's introduce some of the new people. I know one thing that we've been talking a little bit about, I think in our personal lives, maybe on our shows, is some of the Armenian conflicts and stuff like that that's going on. And I know we haven't talked much geopolitics on this show in a while, and I think now is a great time to have Scott joining us because I think he can fill us in. So maybe we'll open up the discussion with that. Maybe we'll see if if Scott has a opinion.
Well, real quick, before we start, why don't you introduce the people who this is their first time being on the show, their show and their names.
So we'll go to. Well, I don't know what happened to Chris. Did I scare him with my technical difficulties?
Probably.
I'll try to get a hold of Chris and get him.
What's up, Jason? How are you?
Good, brother.
But yeah, we'll get Scott, if you want to introduce yourself, Alex, and who else hasn't been here?
Greg
hasn't been on one of these shows before.
We need Palast.
And if everybody want to just give a brief background so people can kind of know who you are and some of your work, and we'll go from there.
Scott, you want to go first?
Well, I'm from antiwar.com, and I wrote a book about Afghanistan. And I do a show, interview show.
Alex, you want to go next?
Sure.
Have you been on the show before?
I've been with Ricky, never in a crowd. So I'm originally Croatian, living in Monaco, a former hedge fund manager, author, blogger, like that. That's about it.
Greg?
Okay, my name is Greg Palast, and you can tell from the hat that I'm an investigative reporter, which most of my reports over the past 20 years centering on vote suppression, as they call it, and mostly for The Guardian, Rolling Stone, Nation, and I've written a bunch of best-selling books, including my latest, which is How Trump Stole 2020. We also have a movie out, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, and we just put out a 1-minute PSA, which I would encourage everyone to watch. It's hosted at Leonardo DiCaprio's Instagram site, but you can also pick it up through gregpalast.com.
Ricky, since we
and by the way, one added thing, since you were talking about, maybe we'll mention Azerbaijan and Armenia and their conflict. Let's bring up some substance once in a while in these shows. It's not all Trump. I was in Azerbaijan for BBC television and Channel 4 News, and so I'm happy to talk about that too.
Yeah, well, Alex, you want to tell people the name of your book too? Because I know you said you kind of glossed over it, but you're kind of an expert in that field. Something we haven't really talked a lot about.
Yeah, I wrote the book originally called The Killing of William Browder, which was promptly banned by Amazon at the request of the State Department's Jonathan Weiner, who was the advisor to John Kerry under Obama administration. It was republished by the Red Pill Press with a changed title in case anybody got offended by the word killing. So it was now it's called Grand Deception, but it got banned again. So now it's only available at the site of Red Pill Press. And there's a couple more books sloshing around in my head. They're going to come out, but I've been busy.
Yeah, and you also know quite a bit about economies and whatnot. So that's something I think maybe we could probably discuss today too, because I think a lot of
people... Yeah. I honestly, I put the last 20 years of my life trying to figure it out, how the whole damn thing works. I think I've pretty much come full circle, but I had to unlearn everything they taught me in university, And so, yeah, I think that's a hugely interesting subject. Not the funnest thing, not the funnest thing to immerse yourself in, but I think hugely important because we're going to have to be making very, very important decision going forward, unless we want to passively acquiesce with what they have in store for us, which I don't think anybody really does, to the extent that they understand what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So if Scott, Greg, if you guys want to talk a little bit, I know Sam's probably very interested because I know he just did a great podcast on it. Him with coming from that country, being Armenian, I'm sure he's very curious on people's take on what's going on there.
Well, Ricky, I'll just give a very general overview, and I'll let Greg. I know he knows all about the oil politics of the Caspian Basin and all of that, but essentially the reason that there's a conflict is because you have a situation like having West Berlin inside East Germany in the old days. In this case, you have this region, Nagorno-Karabakh, which is Armenian territory, which is wholly inside Azerbaijan. And it's ruled by Armenia. And they actually control some, surrounding counties or whatever territories there that are actually really Azerbaijani majority districts that they also rule. So this is a long-standing conflict there. And interestingly, there's actually a part of Azerbaijan that's on the far side of Armenia there. So you would think that they could do a swap with easements and stuff and work this out, but ancient hatreds and all of that. And so what's happened recently then is Azerbaijan has decided to try to kick the Armenians out of there, which has led to war. And then, of course, the Turks are backing Azerbaijan, and I think the Russians have been traditionally backing both sides there. I don't know if anybody is truly taking Armenia's side over Azerbaijan. I know the Israelis are selling Azerbaijan. They have a tight relationship with Azerbaijan. They have for a long time. And they're selling them cluster bombs and other things for use in the war. So, and they had a ceasefire, but it's not holding. They're still fighting. That's the top headline on antiwar.com today. So as far as what difference does it make to us and, American corruption in the Caspian Basin and all of that, then I would certainly turn that over to Greg. And I can't wait to hear from Alex about his Browder book and all of that, because that's a really compelling story. And I'd really like to hear that later, hopefully.
Okay. Well, I've been spending all my time, as you can imagine, when you write a book called How Trump Stole 2020, you tend to be talking a lot about elections. I just got off NBC. So I'm actually happy to remind people that there's something else happening in this world, which is, of course, affected by the election. Okay, I haven't been in Azerbaijan in 10 years, but I've continued to follow. I was investigating for British television. Azerbaijan is on the Caspian Sea. It's an oilocracy. I call it the Islamic Republic of BP. BP controls. In fact, when I was arrested, and by the way, when I was reporting, here's the reason I was there is that when the Deepwater Horizon exploded 10 years ago, April, the oil companies, Chevron and Exxon and British Petroleum, of course, said, "Oh, this is a shock, it's a surprise. We didn't know that a deep water rig could blow out and blow up like that." Well, when they testified in Congress that they had no problems with deep water drilling, in fact, 9 months before the Deepwater Horizon blew up, they testified. In fact, 17 months before the Deepwater Horizon blew up, a British Petroleum deepwater well off the coast of Baku, in the capital of Azerbaijan, had this almost identical blowout for the identical reasons, and they covered it up. It was a well operated by British Petroleum and co-owned with Chevron and Exxon. So they knew what was going on. At first they didn't, by the way. Here's the interesting story is that, and I want to thank Private Manning, who's now, I hope he's out of jail by now, again, for releasing the WikiLeaks documents. Because what we found out in the WikiLeaks documents is that the Bush administration hauled in BP, the U.S. ambassador, working under Condoleezza Rice, and said, "What the hell's going on? Chevron and Exxon are screaming that they're not getting their royalties." And the answer is British Petroleum said, "Well, because we don't want anyone to know that we had a blowout and we lost our biggest rigs out there. They blew out, and we don't want to shout that around." Now you have to understand, international law and U.S. law requires the complete reporting of any such blowout. So they covered it all up. And Condoleezza Rice was Secretary of State, and remember, Chevron had a tanker called the Condoleezza. So this is oil politics. And so the U.S., well, despite we have a very large Armenian population in the U.S., in the way politics runs in America, that would usually mean a pro-Armenian position. But Armenia is lacking in the juice. It doesn't have the oil that Azerbaijan has. So you have people like Henry Kissinger and others who are big backers of the Azeris. With the collapse of oil prices, the corrupt dictatorship of Azerbaijan, the corrupt, brutal, murderous dictatorship of Azerbaijan has clearly done the old trick of like, well, we're now very unpopular. It's a deeply impoverished nation. People there would talk about the wonderful days of freedom and prosperity when they were part of the Soviet Union. You have to go to Azerbaijan. They've gone from having trucks to donkey carts. And now it's gotten worse with the collapse of oil prices. Collapse of oil prices, of course, motivates the government of a guy I call Baby Baba. Everyone calls him Baba, the dictator. So, of course, when you're unpopular, the quickest thing to do is launch a war against your ethnic adversaries in Azerbaijan. Yes, the way that Stalin cut up Azerbaijan and Armenia, he mixed the territories for just this purpose. It's the divide and conquer. You didn't want to have an Armenia that was made up of Armenians and Azerbaijan made up of Azeris, because that will lead to what it ultimately did, the collapse of the Soviet Union. So we have this fossil map created by Khrushchev and Stalin, and now a war because you have an oilocracy which can't maintain power unless they whip up a war. And of course, the Azeris because they have this incompetent dictatorship, that if they do go to war, if the war really does break out, they're going to get their ass kicked. There you go. Look it up. Go to gregpalast.com. Just type in Azerbaijan or Deepwater Horizon.
Which side did you say was going to get their ass kicked?
Oh, the Azeris are going to be destroyed if they continue, because while they are backed by Turkey, that's not going to help them, because as you said,
is there any chance of this being somewhat of a proxy war as well with Turkey? And maybe because I think Turkey, being the Ottoman Empire, there's a part of me that thinks they want back into the game more, and they want to weaken Russia's kind of control over Armenia, and they'd love to get it mixed up again. Do you think that plays anything into it?
Absolutely. We have a proxy war it's kind of a hot diplomatic proxy going on between Erdogan, who has in fact quoted Ataturk, who said that Azerbaijan is the heart of the Turkish nation. So, in other words, they're basically claiming that this greater Turkey, and they're not trying to incorporate it into the physical Turkey. They're not doing that, but they're saying that we are Turkic people. They're Turkic speaking people, the Azeris. And of course, there's a great deal of tension with Russia, which goes back to differences over Syria and the Kurds, etc. So yes, so there's this, unfortunately, you have Azeris and Armenians killing each other for someone else's benefit. That's not unusual. I would note that it was Thomas Friedman said, capitalism will solve all these problems because no two nations have ever gone to war that have McDonald's. But I can tell you, having looked at the throwaway cups, that a lot of the Azeri soldiers who were gunned down, and Armenian soldiers and civilians who were killed, had jobs where they had to say, "Do you want fries with that?" So no, capitalism will not lead to peace in the Caspian.
Greg, just because we only have you for such a short amount of time, you mentioned WikiLeaks, you mentioned Manning, and you mentioned Syria, all very relevant in this sphere. What are your thoughts on the current illegal extradition of Assange and the utter silence by the mainstream media?
Well, Assange and I just together received the award as International Reporters of the Year by the Mexican Association of Journalists. So my fellow award winner, and I'm grateful for the work he has done. I don't have to look. It's not about, one thing I want people to remember, it's not about Assange. It's about a journalist who is facing life in prison in a dungeon because he reported the truth. That's the job of a journalist. And I use the WikiLeaks documents. So why was Manning in jail and not Greg Palast? Why wasn't the New York Times reporters and the Washington Post reporters and my fellows at the Guardian? Well, actually, at the Guardian, we did face arrest. They made us smash up our machines, and they did try to arrest us. But so what Assange was doing was simply trying to communicate the truth. It's not about whether you like Julian Assange or agree with his positions or how he operates. It doesn't matter. That's not the issue. That's all distraction from a direct targeted attack on the First Amendment. That's what's going on with Assange. And let's cut out all the crap about Assange and the particulars. It doesn't matter. We're talking about the arrest. There's only one reason why he's facing a lifetime in a dungeon for telling us the truth as a journalist.
And unfortunately, for those that don't know, Vanessa Beeley is now going to be under attack by the BBC in a special series. I'm going to be talking about it tomorrow, but they're trying to pull the same thing with her. She may come up on charges. So the BBC actually emailed her yesterday. She's pretty frantic about it. And this shows this is about journalism. And they are trying to criminalize people sharing classified documents. The Counterintelligence 2020 to 22 documentation that's out there says leaktivists, hacktivists, and public disclosure organizations are on the same level as ISIS, Hezbollah, and other terrorist organizations, including Al-Qaeda. How do we turn it around, Greg? You've been in this game 20 plus 30 years now?
Well, remember, I was a reporter for BBC Television for their main investigative show, Newsnight, and also an investigative reporter for The Guardian. And while I have to say that the quality of news that's reported by BBC and The Guardian is of a level that we could only dream of in the United States, there is still, even among my fellows there, a long cultural history of fear of the First Amendment. They don't have a First Amendment in Britain. The mother country does not have freedom of the press. If anything else, there's extra restrictions on journalists than on the average citizen. There is really no respect for the idea that of releasing information in the public interest. I actually had fights with BBC and my Guardian editors over this question. I said, why do you want the government to tell you as my editor, you as my producer, what you can put on or put off? And so it's very difficult because you do have this culture where they really do believe that there are state secrets that must be kept. And I find that almost every state secret is not really a secret from our so-called enemies. I mean, let's face it. If Ed Snowden could get all these documents, do you think that Putin doesn't already have them? In fact, Snowden at one point was kind of hinting that he would give Putin the documents if he could get asylum in Russia. And Putin says, I don't need them. It's a joke that secrets are kept from us. Just like, remember, I just told you about the Deepwater Horizon, where our State Department lied to us, hiding the fact that BP's Deepwater well in Azerbaijan blew up so that they were allowed to get a permit, by the way, over the objection of the Department of Interior, because they said, oh, we've never had a problem. So who were they lying to? They weren't lying. Were they lying to the Russians? Were they lying to the Chinese? No, they were lying to the American people. This is what was exposed in WikiLeaks documents. This is what's important to understand. It's lies told to us. These are not secrets. They're lies that they try to cover up. And that's what Assange was going after. And unfortunately, again, while I couldn't do that report in the United States about the lies by Chevron and Exxon and BP. They did allow me to put that on the air, prime time in Britain, prime time in all over Europe. But I couldn't report that in the US. On the other hand, there's still this discomfort, even among journalists in Europe and Britain, about becoming part of the state secrecy apparatus. There is too much of a temptation to go along with it.
Hey, what's this about Snowden offering secrets to Putin? That's bullshit. What are you talking about?
Well, I was saying that there was a hint of that he could do that, but Putin didn't, obviously they didn't care about it. As a way to, this was not from Snowden. This is from the organization. So, but there was no way. So one of the problems we do have, again, is that it's about keeping secrets from us, not keeping secrets from enemies.
If no one else is going to jump in, Greg, I got one more big question. What are your thoughts on this election and mail-in voting? Because I know, I remember the best democracy money could buy. I remember you talking about 2004 and 2008 and all these different things, Bev Harris, the rest of it. Where are we today in 2020, and what do you expect with this election and all these mail-in ballots?
The book is called How Trump Stole 2020. It's not a prediction, it's a warning. If Trump wins because the voters chose him, that's fine. That's democracy. But if he's chosen by Jim Crow trickery, and what we've been finding throughout the book, and what I just issued a report for the ACLU and another report for Black Voters Matter, going through the purge list. We've removed 16.7 million people from the voter rolls in the last 2 years. Now, it's true, some people die, some people move. But our name-by-name analysis, and when I say name-by-name, working with the post office, eBay, Amazon, the rest of the experts on addresses, we've found that about half, a little more than half of the people who've been wiped out from the voter rolls the past 2 years, they're not going to be able to vote because they don't know that they've been wiped out. More than half were illegally removed, and more than half of those are voters of color or young people. Wisconsin, and we took this information, for example, in Georgia, you see those massive long lines, 8-hour waits today, 8-hour waits in line for early voting. And yesterday, 8 hours in line. Why? People asked for mail-in ballots. They couldn't get them because 340,000 people were illegally removed from the voter rolls of Georgia. So they didn't get their mail-in ballots. They didn't know why. So they had to wait in line to go get a ballot. They won't get one, by the way. They won't get one because they're not registered. They'll get maybe a provisional ballot. And 925,000 provisional ballots were disqualified, just short of 1 million in 2016. It'll be worse this year. With mail-in voting, we could end up with a true disaster. About 1 in 20, according to MIT, 22% of mail-in ballots are never counted. So while no, there's not fraud, we're not going to get 100,000 ballots from Venezuela. That doesn't happen. In fact, I just looked. You're 520% more likely to get hit and killed by lightning than commit voter fraud. So that doesn't happen. But voters who do mail-in ballots are defrauded by the government officials and by the partisan officials who are so-called poll watchers. We have an insane system in the United States that says that any nutcase in a boogaloo boy in a Hawaiian shirt can challenge someone's signature on a ballot and it gets thrown out. And by the way, just I'm sure that some of you will bring up the point. Yes, it's true that not all the vote thieves and purgers and people who challenge ballots en masse are Republicans. The Democrats disqualified 24,000 ballots in the Carol Maloney Patel primary. The Justice Democrat had won, but then they threw out more than 12,000 ballots and flipped the election back to the party-backed Democrat. So unfortunately, Democrats play this game too, but this time in this election, in the general, they're going to pay the price when the other side plays the same game, except on a scale that the Democrats can't even imagine and are absolutely not prepared for.
When do we have a president, Greg?
December 15th.
That's your guess, huh?
14th, when the Electoral College meets. Here's what I'm concerned with, and here's the dark fantasy. We saw the Brooks Brothers riot in 2000 where Roger Stone, got a whole bunch of Republican consultants to cause kind of a mini riot at the Miami-Dade County Clerk's Office where they're counting ballots. Now imagine Boogaloo Boys and Proud Boys smashing up buildings where they're counting ballots. Roger Stone, who is the key advisor to the Proud Boys, he issues a tweet saying there's 100,000 ballots have been mailed in from Venezuela, and they're sitting in the Tallahassee, Maine post office. How many minutes before that post office is burnt down? How many clerk's offices will be smashed, destroyed, attacked, burnt? I'm not worried about voter intimidation. I'm worried about intimidation that stops the count of the vote. And therefore, states like Florida, Wisconsin, Michigan will not be able to certify their votes in time. Florida has to certify its electors by November 11th. That's 8 days to count what may be 6 million mail-in ballots, a million of which are absolutely going to be challenged. I don't see how they get those ballots counted, and therefore there's a very good chance that Florida simply will not certify its vote. Remember, you have to certify in time for those guys, the electors, to get on horseback and make it to Washington, D.C. This was, remember, this is the, from the Constitution. So, we could have we might not have 270 votes for any candidate in the Electoral College. It goes to the House, one state, one vote, and Trump gets elected. I don't have a problem if Trump gets elected again by the voters. I do have a problem if he gets elected by violence, which may be the outcome.
I have a question. Do you think there's any chance that it goes beyond that and we have some kind of weird contestation somewhere in January by either party?
Absolutely. I think that this is going to be fought even after the Electoral College. If the Electoral College meets and there's a clear winner, I think it's over. If there is a challenge, it's going to go obviously to the Supreme Court. We have the 1887 Electoral Count Act, which then the court will rule on not just the Constitution, but the Electoral Count Act. And no one knows what the hell that thing means because no one's ever used it. That it goes back to the 12th Amendment, and we've never had a 12th Amendment election.
What is your thoughts on, the people that are not voting, because we're reaching such high levels? I'm here in Canada and I'm from Norway. Like we're having election numbers, people that are actually caring about voting being, 30% of the voting population. What about the silent majority of people that nobody's talking about that, giving up?
Oh, we actually have a gigantic turnout happening this year. I think this is going to set every record. The problem is, will people be able to vote? You're going to have 8-hour lines. You've got 22% of mail-in ballots are not counted. By the way, half of them because the ballots don't get to the voter in time. So, yeah, it's going to be a mess. But most people overwhelmingly do vote. Just so you know, we're running about 85% of registered voters vote. So the non-vote is not as big as people think. Those numbers usually come from adult age citizen population. In other words, the total number of people who could register and vote. But it's actually it's getting quite high again in the U.S. So we don't have a lot of walkaways, and we won't have, as we did in 2016. There's the third party vote is collapsing, and the non-vote is diminishing to a fare thee well.
Hey, Greg, let me ask you this. Not to take Trump's side in this thing, because I'm surely not, but there's so much hype from the Democrat side about how the Republicans are sure to steal it and how Trump's going to call out the Proud Boy militias and all of these things. Mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, you have Hillary Clinton saying Biden should not accept defeat no matter what, or he should not concede no matter what. And you have Rosa Brooks from Georgetown University held these war games with Bill Kristol as Donald Trump and all these things. And the way that they said it in her report for the Washington Post about her own thing, she said, in any circumstance other than a Biden landslide victory on election night, that the Democrats would fight and fight and fight and do everything they could to refuse to accept defeat on all of this. And so I wonder whether you think that, you mentioned about how, they, the liberals rigged the primaries against the progressives and stuff like that. But are you worried about, Biden or the Democratic Party refusing to concede if?
I'm worried about, I'm actually.
And what about Antifa too? I'd like to throw that into it. What about Antifa and their role in intimidation and stuff like that?
Well, number one, I don't think anyone's going to be intimidating anyone. I don't see that happening. Because I can tell you that if the Proud Boys or these Boogaloo schmucks decide to harass black voters in line, I waited 5 hours in line with Souls to the Polls African Americans in Dayton, Ohio. And I can tell you if a Proud Boy comes up and starts harassing people, where's your ID, something like that, they'll find that kid in little wet pieces, stashed around the lines. I'm not worried about intimidation. I'm not worried about intimidation from Antifa. You think Antifa is going to go to the suburbs of Lansing, Michigan, and start
or burning down what the
I
the
don't-
scenario you said the Proud Boys were going to do with the burning down the ballots. Let's
I mean,
say.
from
Oh, but no, I'm not guessing. First of all, remember they just arrested a bunch of people for trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan.
However,
Go to
you
Greg
don't-
Palast. Wait, just a second. Go to gregpalast.com, and I want you to look at the photos by Zach D. Roberts. Zach D. Roberts works for the Palast Investigative Fund. He's been assigned in the past 2.5 years to travel with the Proud Boys and the other far right groups around the country. Take a look at the photos he has. By the way, he's also the guy, when you talk about photos, he's the guy who took the picture of DeAndre Harris as he's being beaten nearly to death by rods and wooden boards, nearly beaten to death in Charlottesville. That was by my team. We took those pictures. Zach had actually a gun in his face when he was taking that photo because they wanted to stop him from taking the photo. He says, "Go ahead and shoot. I've got the camera on."
See, Greg,
And
I would
so
say-
I've never yet. I mean, you have to understand. I've never yet seen. I mean, if I haven't seen tiki torch carrying Antifa people. Yeah, there was a one nut case, and I have no doubt that there will be violence from both sides. But there's one side, and you can't just say it's all even. It's not. Almost all the vote suppression is coming from the Republican Party in the general. Almost all of it came from the Democrats in the primary. So you have to understand these distinctions. And right now, there's no question that the right wing is planning mayhem. It's an absolute fact. They're ready for it, and they're going to try to stop the vote count, not physical violence against people. I'm talking about violence against property and buildings and counting centers to stop the vote count.
But Greg, I would argue with you that either side of that, Antifa or Proud Boys, is probably be more post-election
Yes.
contesting it, and not so much on. I don't think there's going to be much problems at voting places, at polling areas, as you think.
What about 2000? What about 2000 when Roger Stone, who now he's got control of Proud Boys, then he had just consultants, and they stopped the count in Miami-Dade. That's how George Bush is one of the reasons he became president.
I'm just saying, I'm more of the belief that afterwards is where we're going to see the real chaos, because we're not going to have a winner on November 3rd, no matter what.
We're definitely not going to have. Well, we're not going to count. Most of the ballots will not be counted by November 3rd. The question is, will they be counted by December 14th? Will they be counted by the days when the states have to certify? It's the 11th in November 11th in Florida. Most states are November 30th. And I don't know how they're going to be able to count all these mail-in ballots. I think it's insane.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I'm curious. So you don't think that the military, the Pentagon, the State Department, or an alliance of countries that they're just completely ignorant, not involved in this entire scenario that you're putting forward? And what he's talking about is the Integrity Transition Project, which is a bunch of people who basically, as I see them, are giant globalists that are being run by the UN. But I mean, you don't think the military knows what you know? I mean, I don't understand how you're so sure that it's the right.
As you saw Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI.
Yeah, but you're only bringing up guys that are on the same side as you.
Well,
I mean, do you know military?
Whoa! What side am I on? What side am I on? I'm on the side of the voters getting their votes counted. I'm the guy that exposed the Democrats for stealing several elections. So which side am I on? Don't assume I'm on a side.
Greg,
I am going to call out violence when I see it.
Well, it's happening from up here in Canada, all we're seeing is violence from Antifa and other groups right now that it's just getting swept under the rug. So how is that not intimidating right now? They're burning stuff down. They're attacking people. I mean, how is that not? And they're just getting let out of jail. I mean, there's a bunch of DAs there that are just letting people out. That's from what I see from up here.
Okay, well, that's what you see from up there. But our guy isn't looking from Canada. Our guy is right inside those protests. And by the way, on both sides, he's also covering Antifa. He's
like you said, it's hard to. You're locked down in the Hollywood Hills. Some of us are locked down in the middle of cities that have.
I'm not okay. I just said my cameraman Zach D. Roberts, who just actually go to gregpalast.com. You'll see the report he just wrote from the latest protest. He's followed these guys all over the country. He's embedded with them, photoing, including them nearly murdering a black school teacher. So I haven't seen Antifa try to murder a black school teacher yet, but it could be. But I don't know. I'm not a friend of Antifa, just so you know.
No.
I think that anyone who's throwing rocks and all this crap, I think it's insane for any side to be involved in violence. And if you're involved in violence, you should be locked up and the key thrown away if you're trying to stop an election. That's not only a crime of violence, but it's a crime which is against federal law.
I guess I just have one question, and I don't think you're right or left.
And I got to go in a minute, so I'll answer your question. Go right ahead.
Thank you so much. Because, again, I followed you for 18 plus years. When they talk about these war games, and you have William Crystal, for instance, playing Trump, but on the other end, John Podesta playing Joe Biden, doesn't there seem to be kind of like this bipartisan effort, love him or hate him, to get Trump out from the old school neocons to the new school neoliberals?
Oh, yeah. Well, of course. Well, that's called democracy. You don't like it? They don't like. Okay, look, I would love to see John Podesta play Joe Biden. That's got to be a hoot. That's got to be better than Saturday Night Live.
It happened. You can see it.
No, I'm sure it did. I'm just saying is that's fun. That's fun and games, and that's democracy. Mm-hmm. I'm not worried about people arguing their case, voting their case, even people shouting and screaming. That's fine with me too. That's called protest. But what I'm against is what I'm very concerned about is officials removing the rights of voters, especially black people, Hispanics, and Asian Americans, and taking away their right to vote. And again, it's Democrats in the primaries, Republicans in the general. I mean, that's a rule of thumb. I'm not going to tell you that that's 100% in every case, in every instance, but we're seeing it en masse. It's ugly. And we're basically having a racial election in America, and it is an ugly and awful thing. I'm going to have to go. You can come and comment at my site. I'd love to see you. Send me a note and get on my Greg_Palast at Twitter, and Greg Palast Investigates is my Facebook, and gregpalast.com. So let's have a conversation. Let's mix it up.
Greg, thank you so much for being with me.
You're very welcome. You guys are great. Thank you.